Everybody do their homework?
No.
It was honest.
No white lies.
See?
No white lies.
If we can't lie during the lesson that we talk about lying.
White lies.
I have to.
You have to.
That's a have to.
Well,
I really dislike
but she told the truth.
I like the puzzles, I don't care for the rest.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go through. We're not gonna do the puzzle unless I guess if you have the answers. You have the answers. Is a white lie as bad as a black lie?
A lie's a lie, no matter what color.
Okay.
I said no because sometimes it doesn't have like dishonesty or it's not malicious.
Yeah. And we talked about that. You have the white lies that we would consider a white lie is deceitful intent still. And then there's the joking around and things like that, which are different for sure. Okay, number 2. If you knew you would not be caught, would you think about cheating on a test? The only person in this room that's taken a test recently is Justin.
I passed and I did not cheat.
It was open book.
It was open.
He did.
Oh, Aaron took a test recently.
I didn't do good, but I took
Brenna probably took a test recently. Taylor did too.
There's lots of tests being
Yeah.
It's not just you.
So it's we talked about that.
I can't say
Lying.
the same for grade school. That spelling test, I couldn't resist.
I'm withered. I can't spell.
I can't spell either.
And it wasn't my fault, the words were laying on the floor under my desk.
Planted them.
Might have been.
The teachers.
Just before she started going to church.
And became a teacher.
And became a teacher.
I became a teacher.
The teacher, that's it.
It was before accountability.
There you go. That's why God gave us advancements in technology, so we have Word and spell correct. Spell
Microsoft
checker.
Word.
Yeah. See, it
Because you
takes
don't
it
have to
for
go to
you.
the dictionary. Like
Yeah.
My mom would be like, go look it up. And I'm like, I don't know what it starts with.
Yeah.
I only know the first
Exactly.
If I knew how to spell it, I'd go look it up.
This is like
What does jalapeno start with?
There's nothing worse than
And then
somebody
she'd be
says
like, sound it out. And you're like, still, don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty bad when Google or Word doesn't even know what the word you're
Yeah,
trying to
that's
say
what
is.
You're that far off.
Yeah, it's pretty
You're
bad.
not even close.
You're not even close.
And it's easy on my laptop. I can touch the word and hit 3 times, or with my 3 fingers, it'll tell you the definition. And okay, is that the right word I wanted to use? Do that a lot. Can a person ever reach a point of stealing or other sins not bothering you? Yes. With any sin, you can reach the point where it doesn't bother you, where your conscience tells you that you're fine. And we talked about that with being seared. A person can get seared to sin, and so we have to be careful of that. That is the point of studying. We're going over this topic, and some of the topics we're going to be going over now, we all understand the importance of them. We understand that they're wrong. Cheating is wrong, things like that. But it's still good to read over them because what does it do? Yeah, it reminds us. And with the reminder, it helps us to stay on track. A verse that we're going to read later in the sermon is 2 Timothy 4 and verse 2. And so preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering. That's what the word of God does. And that's 2 Timothy 3 and verse 16 and 17. And so it reproves us, it rebukes us, it encourages us. And so there's a point of needing to continue to study so that we don't get seared. Somebody read Revelation 21 and verse 8 and give a definition, an overview of how this applies to our study.
But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
Okay, so what does this verse tell us?
Even the liars are going
Yeah.
to a bad place.
Yeah, even the liars are included in this list of those that will end up in hell. Now, as we talked about, this is habitual liars, ones that do not care to come out of that. A person can come out of that sin and repent of it and live a different life. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 5, chapter 6. Galatians 6, 7 through 8.
Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting.
Okay, how does this apply?
When they say soweth, what are they saying?
It's what you plant in a sense, so it's what you do.
What you do.
Whether a man soweth, he reapeth. So if you sow something that's evil, what's going to be the reaping of it?
You're gonna get some evil back.
Yeah, you're going to reap the evil. So if a person lies,
Doesn't make
they're
sense to me.
striving to, continuing to lie. What's the outcome? What's the production of that?
You're gonna get lied to.
Possibly, but nothing good. Nothing good comes out of it. The result, the consequences, it's just another ways of saying it. The consequence of sin is death, spiritual death, but also a person that lies, they're going to be found out in time. And the consequence of that is going to be more severe than if it had been they just said something in the first place. And even if they had lied, say, okay, I lied, sorry. Because the deeper a lie goes, the harder it is to get out of it. The worse the consequence is going to be, really. Colossians 3, 9 through 10.
Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him.
All right, so how does this apply? In the context, it's talking about unity and being unified as brethren. So how does this apply?
Make sure we put the old man away.
Okay, which is, the things that have done in the past, lying. What can lying do to a unified body?
Destroy it.
Yeah, it's going to destroy it.
It's within.
Yeah. It's not going to continue to be a unified body anymore. So it says to put off lying from between one another, because what it will do, how it will destroy the congregation, the church. Ephesians 4:25.
Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another.
Okay, how does this apply?
You gotta speak truth to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and because we're members of one another.
We're all one.
Yeah, it goes right along with Colossians, that unity. We need to speak truth to one another to continue to stay unified. Ephesians 4 is about unity, the whole chapter. Proverbs 6:16 through 19.
I think that maybe that's part of our nation's problem now, United States, but we're so full of lies and corruption nowadays. It seems our country has really, I don't know, not headed in the right direction because of the lies and the debauchery and things.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can't trust somebody. It's hard.
How can you be united if we can't even?
Yeah. We're going to talk about the next part, which we're not really focusing on lying, but a person can do a lot of good things and be really good at something, but if they tell a lie, what happens to their reputation?
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It hurts it. It makes it to where that person's not trustworthy. We have unfortunately, we have a lot of leaders in our country that are not trustworthy. And so you just don't know what they're doing and what they're planning. So Somebody read Proverbs 6, please, 16 through 19.
These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren.
Okay, so how does this apply?
God hates liars.
God hates lying. And so we need to do our best to stay away from it. And a person may struggle with it and may fail at times, but they can change that, just like any other sin, no matter what it is. Since the crossword was done by several, let's just go through it.
I did not do it.
Uh-oh.
I
Kathy
did
probably
watch
did.
Wednesday night.
Lauren
Maybe
did.
friend on the feed
There you go.
from somewhere.
One lie usually leads to
Another.
another. Number 2, it should bother your blank to cheat.
Conscience.
So that's one I would have to look up to write in there, because I don't know how to spell that. It's in the paragraph? Oh, that's a good.
I had to look too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on science, that's the easiest way.
I didn't even think about that.
On science.
I did.
You gotta learn how to, you gotta know how to spell
Start-
science.
Just start saying conscience. That's the only word you say.
Pronounce words the way they are, how they look. Jalapeno. All right, number 4.
Laughing at
A lie involves deliberate deceit. Blank is a moral issue.
Dishonesty.
Okay, dishonesty. Let's see, number 10. Whatever a person sows, that he will reap. A wise man tells us what God thinks about lying in this book. Proverbs. The one to whom Abraham said Sarah was his sister. Abimelech. Yeah. It takes blank for a Christian to stand up for honesty.
Commitment.
Yeah. Let him that blank steal no more, but rather let him labor. Stole. One often lies in order to try to get out of trouble. All blanks shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire. Liars. Students have sometimes been guilty of blank in school. Cheating. Not all blanks steal big things. Thieves. That's right. So we talked about that. So in this lesson, we learned a lie is anything you say or write that is not true. One lie usually leads to another to get us out of trouble or to sound bigger. It is wrong to steal anything big or small from anyone. The Bible teaches all people to be honest with all others. Cheating is another form of dishonesty, sadly viewed by some as acceptable. It takes great commitment to stand up for honesty, and it does. Christians must be godly, honest, and truthful in all aspects of their lives. Why is that important? Why should a Christian continue to strive to be honest in all things, especially in focusing on their example?
Well, it doesn't get you caught up in that web of lies, first of all.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be a role model.
Yeah, it's just to be a role model to others. And so if you're not honest, people are going to say, I thought he was a Christian. I mean, that's just basically what it is. Because they associate a Christian with one that is honest, and they should, because we're followers of Christ. We should be honest. All right, any questions on this lesson 9 before we move on to 10? We're going through these a lot quicker than we were at the beginning part. So we've only got 3 lessons left of this book. And then after that, I don't know what we're going to do. We'll have to talk about that today, what we'll focus on next. But lesson 10, so we're going to look at profanity and gossip. These are 2 that, they're big. They're big ones to focus on. There's not really a lot to go expand upon as we're looking through this lesson. That's why you only have 1 page or 1.5 pages. Because it's pretty obvious what the scriptures say on both of these topics. And talking about profanity and gossip. But it is definitely something that teenagers are going to deal with. And not only teenagers, adults deal with this every day. Listening to people, the way they talk, profanity, maybe even struggling with them themselves. And maybe sometimes we use words that we don't think are profane or fall into profanity, but could be used as a euphemism. We're going to talk about euphemisms a little bit because euphemisms a lot of times are thought to be a better way of saying things. Well, if it still reminds a person of the word you're trying to say, probably shouldn't say it. And so, somebody read the first paragraph there.
What is the most powerful part of the body? Is it the arm or the thigh? Actually, it is neither of these. The most powerful part of the body is the tongue. Your tongue has the power to curse God or bless Him, destroy another's reputation or build it up, and identify you as a non-Christian or a believer. As a Christian, you need to think carefully about the way you use your mouth.
All right, so you think about it, what is the most powerful muscle or powerful part of your body? People would say, well, it'd be, your legs have one of the strongest muscles and different things like that, but it's really your tongue. And why is that the case?
Sharper than a two-edged sword.
Okay, it's sharper than a two-edged sword. What else?
Then you can say a few words and destroy somebody's life.
Okay, you can. You can destroy somebody's life with just a few words. You can destroy your own life with a few words. And so our tongue is a very powerful member. And you think about it being one of the strongest parts of our body, we're going to talk about in James chapter 3, it is also the hardest part of our body to control because, the things that we can say. You think about what it said here. You can bless God with the same mouth, or a person can curse God. Reading through Job had the opportunity to curse God. His wife told him to curse God and die, but he didn't. But he did say a lot more he did say a lot in the book of Job, mainly in response to his friends and what they were saying. But the amazing part of how powerful our tongue is how it can destroy a person's life, how it can curse God, how it could actually do a lot of good. Our tongue also. And so somebody read the next paragraph there.
One of the most powerful scriptures on the use of the tongue is James 3:2-12. James compares the tongue to a bit in a horse's mouth, verse 3, and the helm of a large ship, verse 4. Both the bit and the helm are small parts, but they control something much larger. The purpose of the bit is not to weaken the horse, but to channel his energy in the proper way. The same goes for the tongue. James says the tongue is a fire, verses 5 and 6. Fire can heat food and warm cold campers, or it can burn houses and scorch human flesh. Again, our tongues are the same way. We can use them for great good or terrible harm. James concludes his discussion of the tongue by saying a tree does not produce two different kinds of fruit, verse 12. The Christian needs to use his mouth for God only, not for Satan.
All right, so James chapter 3. Before we go there, somebody read Mark 7, 20 through 23. This kind of shows us why it's important, why we need to control our tongue. And it kind of gives us some insight on how we can control the things that come out of our mouth. It's Mark 7, 20 through 23.
And he said, what comes out of a man that defiles a man? From within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornication, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man.
All right, so what is he talking about comes out of a man?
When he speaks.
Yeah, the things that you speak. The things that we speak come from inside. Now, the inside is a reference to what?
Our soul.
Our soul, our mind. I believe those are interchangeable, the mind and the soul, because our mind is what's going to continue on. And so what comes out of our soul or mind is what we speak. And so what we put into our soul, what we put into our mind, will eventually come out, if it's good or bad. And that's what Jesus is focusing on here.
Reflects who we are. And it's the most true statement. You know, what you put in is what you get out.
Yeah, it is. It reflects on who you are. If we are a good person that is striving to be righteous with God, the things that will come out of our mouth will be good and wholesome and pure as God wants them to be. Does that mean that every time that's going to happen? No. But it is a indication of what is the heart is, the mind, the soul, whatever the case may be, whatever word you want to use there. And so why is it important we talk about profanity and gossip is because the things that we put in, the way our heart is going to reflect in the things that we say. And so if we're a person that is constantly using profane language, maybe the things that's in our heart is not correct. More than likely it isn't. And we need to work on what we put in. And so how do we fix what we put in? How do we fix what we focus on?
We need to put the Bible in.
Yeah, put the Bible in. Somebody read, it's not in your notes, but Philippians 4, I think it's verse 7.
Philippians 4.
Mm-hmm.
And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus.
Next verse. That was verse off.
Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things.
All right, so we've looked at this verse before, but if we want good to come out, we have to meditate on what is good. It talks about truth. What is truth? John 17:17.
We talk about meditating. What are we thinking?
Meditating is focusing on it. It's not sitting and sitting somewhere like you see on TV and go things like that. But it's reflecting.
I can't get my legs.
I can't either. I can't sit that way.
It also is, the things that you're hearing around you, what is also what you're putting into your mind.
Yeah, it is, because if you're around that kind of speech a lot, it's going to affect what you think in your mind. It might come out. And I noticed that. But the thing is we still have to be around in the world because we're to be influences and we're to teach and we live. And so that's why it's important for us to be here together. That's why it's important for us to spend time together because each one of us here is striving to do what is right and do what is good.
You guys went roller skate without me.
And we did. You were in
Meditating
D.C.
on that too.
You were all the line was going on.
The what?
You were where all the line was going on.
Yeah. I did, yeah. I rode home with the Kansas City mayor yesterday.
Oh.
There's some line going on there.
Yeah. So that's the importance, what you hear and what you're absorbing. I used to work at a job where I was around that all the time. I was around people that constantly talked like that. It wears on you after a while. It does. And every one of us here probably in one of those situations. And so you have to be careful of how much time you spend around that. You got to counteract that with good and counteract that with the importance of, that's why it's important for us to assemble together the opportunities that we have. Because the more that we spend together, the more we influence one another to do right and do good.
And we influence those around us too.
And we do. We do.
They notice.
They notice. And it should. They should notice the difference in how we speak and how we act. So, but meditating, as we see in Philippians 4:8, is not only reflecting or looking at what is good and reading what is good, but thinking about that. It's the processing. That's the whole idea, I guess, of meditation is processing and in this, how this word is used here. Taking the information, processing it, and putting it into our life. How it applies to me. You see that word, very similar word used in the book of Psalms a lot. Meditating on God's word. You see that used a lot, and that's what it means, is just to reflect upon his word and how it can apply to you. And so when we do those things, what's going to come out? What is good? And so when we're looking at this study, the important thing to remember is what we're putting in is going to help reflect it's going to affect what comes out. And so when we go to James chapter 3, somebody read verse, the book said 2 through 12, but the context of it really is verse 1 of what he's talking about here. And we're going to talk more about verse 1 later in the sermon. But somebody read James 3, 1 through 12.
My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive greater condemnation. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, and are driven by fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessings and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either at vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh.
All right, so verse 1 really lays the context of what is being talked about here. Of course, it's talking about the tongue. James definitely makes note of that. But verse 1, King James used the word masters. A better translation of that is teachers. And what he is saying is, let my brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. Not everybody needs to be a teacher. And there's a reason for that. And the fact is, and we're going to talk more about this later, but a teacher, they need to be qualified, and they also need to be faithful. They also need to be righteous. And you think about this as you're going through this, that phrase, practice what you preach. We say that a lot, right? And as a Christian, we should be that way. We practice what we preach. And so we profess to be a Christian. We should act like we're a Christian in our actions. And so as a teacher, one that is a teacher cannot profess to teach and to bless God in the things that they say, but then turn around and not live it, and not practicing what they preach. I mean, that's just basically what this is talking about. But it also gives us the principle of how important our tongue is to control and how hard it is to control. And so you get into verse 2, it says, for we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble a word, he is a perfect man, also able to bridle the whole body. When the Bible uses the word perfect, does it mean to be sinlessly perfect? No. None of us can be sinlessly perfect. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. 1 John chapter 1 tells us that if we say we have no sin, we call God a liar. Each one of us have sinned, and each one of us will struggle with temptation and sinning the rest of our life because we're human. And that's why we need Christ. That's why we need the blood of Christ. But one that is able to control their tongue, that's what it's talking about here. One that is able to control his tongue is a complete man. The word perfect, the best way to really describe in the definition how it's translated is to be complete. You think about 2 Timothy 3, verse 16 and 17. Verse 17 in particular I think in the New King James it even uses the word complete. ASV does. But the King James still use that word perfect there. But when you take all of the Word of God and how it reproves, rebukes, and exhorts us, it helps us to become a complete person, a complete Christian, a follower of God. And so if we want to be able to complete ourselves in our service to God, we need to learn how to control our tongue. And one that can master that, one that can do that, really does a good job at bridling their tongue or bridling their whole body, controlling their whole body. Because you think about this, if we can control our tongue, it will affect the rest of us because of what our tongue can do, which we already kind of mentioned. A person can be great at something. It can be a perfect example in a lot of ways, but if they lie, it can completely affect their reputation. It can really affect how people trust them. And so,
But is it the chicken or the egg situation? Because we can't control the tongue unless you control what you put in, I think. So I don't know if that's the chicken or the egg, and I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm just saying we gotta control what we're taking in and surrounding ourselves with. We can't control the tongue without that.
it's a part of it.
But young children don't know that filter. If they grow
Nope.
up with it, then most likely they're going to talk that way, and then they get into school and they're in shock because they're getting in trouble for words they don't even understand.
Yep. Yeah, their atmosphere can make a big difference.
I grew up with profanity on one side of the parent, the other side you never heard them speaking.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, my brothers and sisters chose the profanity side, and I was the other way where I didn't use it. But, yeah, but it also proved well for me as a teacher, because I was disciplining a child for a word he said, and he was like, "Oh, don't tell me you haven't ever used a word like this," and have it slip out and all this stuff. And another teacher walked up and heard us talking, and she said, "I've known her a long time, and I've never heard her use a word like that." And he just turned around and looked at us.
Yeah, because you had a reputation. Yeah. Yeah, it does. You bring up a good point, is the fact that the kid's environment. They grow up, I don't know how many videos I've seen of, some parent laughing at their child saying some cuss word, and they think it's funny. I worked with a guy that was like that. He talked about how his child had said something the other day, and he was laughing about it. His wife wasn't very happy about it, but he was laughing about it. Thought it was hilarious. They're going to grow up and not realize those are bad. That is bad language.
Then they get kindergarten, and they have to deal with it.
Yeah, and the teachers have to deal with it. Yeah. So, tying that together, Justin's talking about, a part of controlling our tongue is controlling what we bring in. And it's difficult for a child, like you said, if they're in an environment where those things are being said. But also children are learning. They hear words at school. They hear words other places. And they'll come home and say them. And how we handle that. I remember the first time I said something when I was a kid. I never forget that. I got in trouble, pretty big trouble. I didn't know what it meant. I just heard it somewhere.
A lot of them don't.
Yeah, and you don't. And so we have to help our children to learn these. Some of the words that they're hearing are not good. And so controlling a tongue is extremely difficult to do. And even to the point where James says here, we're not going to be able to tame it. What does it mean to tame something? It's completely under control, and it's not going to act out, or not going to run off the rails. Our tongue will never get to that point. That means that we have to actively be thinking about the words that we say. We say that phrase, think before we speak. That's important. If we don't think before we speak, that's when we get in trouble. Because things may come out that we don't intend to come out, we don't tend to say, if we're not thinking before we act. And so in that example of how hard it is to tame the tongue, James gives us several examples. The first one, verse 3, indeed he puts bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. You think about a horse, that small piece of metal that goes in their mouth controls that horse. Keeps it from going the direction that you don't want it to go. You can direct that horse once they've learned. Does it take training? Yeah, I've never tried to break a horse. Never owned a horse, so don't plan on it. But it's hard to train them. But once you train them, that bit can control them. But you think about a horse, meekness. The word meek has that idea of power under control. And so when we think about power under control, a horse is extremely powerful. They're a very powerful animal. Yet you can control the animal with a small piece of metal. And so, as the book mentioned, that bridle is able to funnel that power where it's needed. You think about meekness. Jesus was very meek, but he was able to control that strength and use it where it was needed. You think about Jesus, he was all powerful. He could have just wiped out people right then if he'd gotten mad, but he didn't. Jesus had that power under control, meekness. Our tongue is that way too. Our tongue has a lot of power to be able to do good. But it also has the same amount of power to be able to do evil. So if we can, in a sense, put a bridle in our mouth and are able to control that power and put it towards the direction we need it to go, we can do a lot of good things for God. We can fulfill what he wants us to do, Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, in glorifying God in the good works that we do. And so it's a great example using that bit. And not only that, he gave the second example is about a ship. A ship can be extremely large. You think about the ships that we have today, the aircraft carriers, the cargo ships, how massive those ships are, but how are they controlled? By a small rudder. I'm not saying it's this small, but relative to the size of the ship, that rudder is extremely tiny. Yet it can direct that ship in many directions. The same goes for us. We can have so much energy, we can have so much power, in a sense, in being able to do something. You think about Paul, how much energy Paul had, and how much zeal Paul had for God. What happened when his rudder was faced the wrong direction? What was he doing? Do what? Yeah, he was persecuting the church. He was, headlong into and helping the Jews overcome Christianity. But yet when he channeled that power correctly and that zeal correctly, he ended up writing 13 books of the New Testament. He ended up doing so many great things and establishing congregations throughout the world. And so the same can be said about us. You and I have the great zeal and power to be able to do a lot of good for God. But if we don't control our mouths, that energy could go towards destruction and destroying the church.
It's more we have to control our heart and our emotions in order for our tongue to obey.
I think it has a lot to do with that. I really do.
Because if your heart's not in the right place and your emotions are gone astray, then your tongue's going to act after those.
100%. I think you're right. Our heart really reflects about what comes out. And so we have to control what we bring in, control what our heart's like, and it will reflect upon that. So any more questions, comments? We're out of time. We'll pick up here Wednesday. All right. Thank you guys for your time.